Younger dude the other day asked me what was it like growing up in the 80s. I had to pause on that question. We were smoking one, chilling. We had a little bit of time to talk. He was just like, what was the 80s like, huh? I had to pause on it for a second. I was all right, well, look, we got a little bit of time. I'm going to tell you the good part of the 80s. Now, I'm a Gen Xer, Gen X baby, but I'm a young Gen Xer. So the 80s was my pre-teen years. The 90s was my teenage years. The 80s, I wasn't a teenager yet. So I was young in the 80s, coming up in the 80s. But the thing that was sweet about the 80s, first thing you got to say, very, very first thing you got to say about the 80s is the fucking music. The music of the 80s might be, could be, probably the best music of any decade. Now, I know some boomers, they'll say the 60s. Some older Gen Xers will say the 70s. Some people will say, I mean, every generation is going to say relatively their time period. But think about it like this. This is what I told a young head. I said, look at it like this. Shit from 40 some years ago, you could play now and people will still get up and dance to. When I was coming up, you couldn't play no shit from the 1940s and people get up and start dancing to. What the fuck? You can play no shit from the 1950s, really, and people get up and start dancing to. But today, in today's age, you can still play some shit from the 19... Now, I ain't gonna even mention the shit that gets sampled. But I'm also not talking shit because we did our fair bit of sampling as well. But, you know what I'm saying? You hear good shit from back in the day, you appreciate it, and then you want to add your little something to it. That's just respect. As long as you admit that you didn't invent this shit, show some respect to where you got it from, to the source. Respect the sample. But, you know what I'm saying? Salute the sample. But 80s music, you got to start off. Some of the best music. First of all, it's when rap really started coming out of New York and started coming out of the inner city. So more and more people started hearing it. And you had break dancers and, you know, graffiti and shit. And a lot of people who weren't part of the culture or who never wanted to be part of the culture couldn't understand the beauty behind it. They couldn't understand that, like, from the different educational and musical programs, different activities being cut in the 70s, with kids not having much creative outlets to, you know, let those creative juices flow and shit in a nice positive way. Next thing you know, you got kids scratching records and MCing. People don't even know what MC means, master of ceremony. But in the rap game, MCing, the MC was not the original star. The original star was the fucking DJ playing the music. And then eventually the MC would add some words to it, just like to keep the party going, to keep it hype and all of that. But then eventually the MC started becoming, no, my point being is it was all part of the culture. It was all part of like this bottled up creativity that got cut off in many of the public schools and many of the public areas that kids could, you know, congregate. And the next thing you know, they creating this creative shit in the basements, at the block parties, you know what I'm saying, in the garages. And the older heads are looking at them like, what's this trash music? What's this ghetto music? And it was the 80s that it first started finally getting out of New York, broader past New York, beyond the inner city, and different other people, different other cultures, different other races was like, that's the shit right there. And then you also know this, with the youth, they are always pretty much always going to do their thing, but in particular, they're going to be really kind of opposite and rebellious to their parents, to their grandparents. They're going to be a little bit different. And so that's what rap was in the 80s. It was different, but if you came up in the 80s, it wasn't different. It was a part of us. And then also there's MTV. Love MTV, fuck MTV, because early MTV was fucking racist. No matter how they try to fucking spin that shit, early MTV was fucking racist, and it was Michael Jackson's Thriller that fucking saved him, basically. They didn't want to play no black people. If I'm correct, the very first black video played on MTV was the black British boys who did Pass the Dutchie on the Left. I'm going to smoke on that one because it's actually a smoke song. Pass the Dutchie on the left hand side. Oh, so you can play some British black people, but you can't play black people in America? They basically rapping, but you can't play. Get the fuck out of here. And I think the very first, like, quote unquote rap song that they played on MTV was like Herbie Hancock's little like techno type thing. That's what they was willing to play. Anyway, I'll make another video about how I love and hate MTV. I got a lot of love for MTV. Came across a lot of different genres, different artists, expanded my taste, expanded my curiosity about life. But also, when you look back on it and you realize early MTV was racist as fuck. They refused to play black artists because they were worried about their southern base. That's always the excuse. We're worried about our southern audience. Anyway, MTV was out there. Sports. The 80s was good about sports. In terms of, you had some great boxing back in the day. Hagler Hearns, Leonard Hearns. Mike Tyson came up in the mid to late 80s, and he was a beast back in the day. You had Bird Magic come up and basically take where Dr. J and Kareem and different other people who was leading the NBA, and they just exploded it. Then you had fucking Michael Jordan come into play. 80s was super fucking great, man. You had Bird Magic battling Jordan, trying to come up there, but he couldn't, because right above him was Isaiah Thomas and the fucking Bad Boy Pistons. You gotta show some respect to Detroit and the Bad Boys, baby. Then they finally knocked off Bird, finally knocked off Magic, and stood on top for a few years, till finally Jordan got his chance, finally got through. That was all in the 80s, man. Even Akeem Olajuwon, Patrick Ewing came up in the 80s. Like, 80s was sweet as fucking basketball. And then football, I was a 49ers fan, so the 49ers was doing their thing. Love me some Jerry Rice, Joe Montana and crew, Ronnie Lott. So it was like the 80s was, there was some really sweet shit about the 80s. Really sweet shit. And then you had some people that wasn't making money in the 80s. You had some people like, say, on Wall Street, different other, type financial jobs. Maybe you had a nice little job. You was working for the state, for some type of municipality, city, county job or something. And then some people were slanging. Some people were slanging and making good money with it. They may not last very long with it, end up in jail or in the grave, but some people was making money out there, and unfortunately, they inspired different kids. It was like, the neighborhood is devastated, but this motherfucker over here is looking nice and crispy, nice ride, got honeys with him, flashing cash. I want to be like that dude. And that's part of the negative side. I'll do a video about the negative side of the 80s, because it definitely was a negative side. Definitely was a negative side of the 80s. But the good side of the 80s, that often people want to flash back to, Stranger Things, different other little shit that want to flash back to the 80s. The 80s was sweet. There was some good shit about the 80s. Especially, like I say, for somebody who wasn't a teenager. I didn't hit my teenage years to the 90s. So coming up in the 80s as a young pup, you know what I'm saying? The 80s was sweet. Like, bright-eyed and shit. You seen some shit about the world that looked like it wasn't really right, wasn't good. But you also, like I said, we enjoyed ourselves in the 80s, man. The 80s there were some good times in the 80s. And then towards the latter part of the 80s, you had a certain, like, at least in America, no, even beyond this, but in America, you had a certain, like, blooming of a certain type of, like, black pride, like black American pride, like African American pride. People, groups like Public Enemy and KRS-One and different other people, they were using words and music and lyrics and beats to not just entertain, but also educate. Edutainment, as they called it. And it was having an impact. And that was really sweet coming into the late 80s. Then they got suspiciously kind of bumped out the way by, like, gangbang music and fuck music. I'm not necessarily talking shit. I listen to all of it. But I'm just saying, like, I was telling a young buck about this in another previous conversation. I might even mention this in a previous video. Go look at some of the other shit in the catalog. But I was like, no, rap had a certain period where it had a nice little strong positive contingent. It was a nice faction of rap, nice section of rap that was very positive and uplifting, maybe even threatening to some people. And then around a certain time period, it just kind of like went away. It just wasn't getting the sales. It just wasn't getting the spins. It just wasn't getting the airplay like some of this other more vile shit was that I listened to. Like I said, I'm not talking shit. But, and so also for parents today, grandparents especially, if you came up in the 80s, 90s, you can't say shit about today's music. You can't say shit about your kids' music. Because you know goddamn well, if we go back and listen to some of the shit that it was like, damn. But you remember when 2 Live Crew was like scandalous? Move something like women walking around in tight dresses, that's all? Please. But the 80s was sweet. The 80s had some sweet shit to it. I often sometimes will see a picture or something, or, oh, you know, it's a great 80s flashback. One of my favorite actors of all time, Eddie Murphy. Go watch the intro, the beginning scenes of Beverly Hills Cop. Shot in Detroit. Go watch the first like 5-10 minutes of Beverly Hills Cop. Fucking 80s. It's an 80s flashback. The whole movie is an 80s flashback. But anyway, there's times when I wish that, like, you know, I wish I could see that again. I wish I could be there in that moment again. And yet I don't. And yet I don't. Because, as I'm going to state in another video, there was some shit about the 80s that I'm glad we got to fuck about the 80s. Anyway, it's your boy. Tell me what you think. Let me know you agree or disagree. Was the 80s all fucked up? We was on the verge of the apocalypse? Or was 80s, you know what I'm saying, that sweet spot, that G spot, and everybody just hating on us? Anyway, Gen X, baby. I'll holla at you.